If you're wondering why people are becoming increasingly concerned about climate change and saying that time is running out, here is a quick recap on how we got to where we are today. We have known since the 1930s that adding carbon dioxide to the atmosphere could influence global temperatures. Scientists started properly sounding the alarm in the 1970s at the Earth Summit in Stockholm in 1972 and more widely at the first World Climate Conference in 1979. But greenhouse gas emissions continued to increase, and it wasn't until 1988 that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was formed, kickstarting the process of distilling all the peer-reviewed warnings in the science into a single document published in 1990. Still, few reacted despite the serious warnings, and governments continued to prevaricate, really. It was another 5 years before the UN Climate Change Conference of the Parties, that was the first COP, was in Berlin in 1995. In the early 2000s, climate commitments began to be included in many political manifestos as politicians woke up to both public concern and the scientific necessity to see some action. It was 2006 before Scotland really began to step up, and it constructed a coalition of scientific, environmental and humanitarian bodies under Stop Climate Chaos Scotland. It had a strong hand in pushing for the Climate Change Act Scotland in 2009 that built on the wider UK Climate Change Act from the year before, but with even more stringent targets. This was quite a bold step by Scotland and the UK. And with a G20 finance ministers meeting in 2009 and then the Copenhagen summit, the COP summit, it was really hoped that we'd be able to translate this ambition of Scotland and the UK into something that would really deliver for the world. Unfortunately, Copenhagen did not deliver. It turned out to be a great disappointment for scientists, for campaigners, for really most people who wanted to see us begin to seriously transition to a lower carbon world. And many people left feeling real pain of disappointment and missed opportunity. At the Paris COP of 2015, we finally witnessed a meaningful agreement which really focused attention on the need to restrict temperature to preferably 1.5 degrees centigrade if we want to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. This felt like a significant step, but as well as being voluntary, the commitments made by almost every nation didn't go far enough, and probably only limited temperature to rises more like 3.7 degrees above where we are today. And delayed by COVID and 26 years on, we come to this COP in Glasgow. Every nation is meant to bring newer, better, more stringent commitments, more ambition and a real effort with significant resources. More willingness to fund those currently most impacted by climate change, more pace, more scale, more urgency if you like. Glasgow needs to be a significant step up from the Paris Agreement of 2015. It can't afford to be another Copenhagen of 2009. COP26 is a massive gathering of world leaders, civil servants, ministers, negotiators, alongside scientists, lobbyists, NGOs and companies. Everyone who's got a finger in the climate pie will be there. But it's the governments and their civil servants who will be at the heart of negotiations in the so-called blue zone. Outside the blue zone you get the green zone, which will be mainly around the Glasgow Science Centre. It's a place where more of the organisations who sit outside can gather. That will be those businesses, those NGOs and some of the big scientific lobbying groups. When you bring all those people together alongside plenty of media, there are expected to be 30 or 40,000 people gathered in Glasgow for this conference. And it matters because they're supposed to be ratcheting up those commitments that were given in Paris in 2015. At that conference, governments committed to come back every 5 years to see how they had improved on what they had offered before. So you'll be able to look for commitments to see if countries are going further than they did in Paris and by how much. This will be one of the real tests of success in Glasgow. The other big test will be whether the money is on the table to enable poorer countries to grow their economy in a low carbon way, to make that green transition. $100 billion a year was promised back in 2009, but we're yet to see that cash really and honestly on the table. and it will really help to convince those countries that they're not being expected to clean up the mess that we largely made without us footing much of the bill. COP26 will also focus on various specifics about adaptation, biodiversity, nature-based solutions, and whether marginalised communities are getting proper representation. To be on the road to a 1.5 degrees centigrade rise or less will require governments to agree much more significant cuts in emissions than they've done in the past. Tough regulations will also encourage business to invest in low carbon technologies. Overall, collaboration and acceleration will really help deliver a cooler world. The first 25 annual COPs have not done enough to halt climate change. Will the 26th? You'll have to wait and see.